Okay everyone, so in this lesson, we will be talking about how we can use the background attachment property so we can go and have our image here fixed on the right side of our screen. Now, if we go to the background attachment property documentation here, it says that the property sets whether a background image scrolls with the rest of the page or is fixed. So if we go down here, we can see the property values, the CSS syntax, and here we have the value scroll. The background image will scroll with the page, and that is the default. We have fixed, the background image will not scroll with the page. We have local, the background image will scroll with the element's contents. And we have the initial value and the inherit value here. So let's try to go and apply this in our project, and let's see how that will work. Okay, so let's try to go and apply the background attachment fix here. That's the one that we would want to use for us to achieve the same effect as to our example here. So let me refresh it, and there you go. Now if I try to scroll down, you would see that the image is fixed on the right side of our screen. It also allows us to scroll our content here. Okay, so I hope you got the idea on how we were able to achieve this. Now we just need to go and add some of the contents here and change some of the styling that we have here in our project so that it will look a lot more like this one. So for the copyright character here, I just want to introduce to you the HTML entities. So when we say HTML entities, these are characters that are reserved in HTML. We can see here that if we use the less than or greater than signs in our text, the browser might mix them with tags, and that's where the character entities are used to display reserved characters in HTML. A character entity looks like this. We have the ampersand and then the entity name. We can see here that we can also use the ampersand, number sign, and then the entity number. And if we want to have the less than symbol, we will need to use the entity here that is composed of the ampersand, L, and T, and then the semicolon or the ampersand, number sign, and then the number 60. So we can see here that the advantage of using an entity name is that it is easy to remember, while the disadvantage will be that it will not be supported by all of the browsers. So the support for entity numbers is good, and that's why we usually use the entity numbers here. So if we go down here, we can see some of the useful character entities, and the one that I used would be for our project will be the entity for the copyright symbol. So let's try to go and apply this in our project. So we do have here our basic footer section here. So let's try to go to our code editor, and then let's try to go to our markup here and make a footer section. So let's use a child element div here with a class name footer, and then let's have a paragraph with the ampersand copyright symbol here. You would see that the IntelliSense of Visual Studio Code is giving us a hint here. And then 2020 Rodrigo Bunzer S. Lopez. Now let's try to go to our browser and then refresh. And you would see now that we have the copyright symbol beside the 2020 and my name. So let's go back to our code editor here and let's try to apply some styling to our div here with a class footer. So let me just go here and create some comments here. Footer section. What I would want to do here, select the footer selector and then give it a height of 20 VH, width of 61.5%, background color of RGB. Let's give it a value of 22, 19, and 19 here. Let's save that and let's try to check our browser here. Okay, so we now have our footer section here. And let's apply some color for the font. Let me go and give it a color of white, and text align center and padding top of 60 pixel. So let's go back to our browser, refresh, and there we go. Now let's go and change the font family here and go to Google Font, and let's use the Open Sans font family for Google Fonts. So I'm sure you're already familiar with how to use the Google Fonts website here. So we have here the Open Sans, and we would want to use this light 300 here. So we would want to embed it. So let's go and copy this, go to our code editor, then go to our header section here below our title tag, and then let's specify the font family. Instead of Calibre, let's go get the font family here. So let's go back here and let's save that. Let's see how that will look on our browser, and there we go. Now let's just go and change the color of the text here. So most of the things that we are doing here right now are simply the things that we have already so far learned from before, so it won't be that difficult for you to follow. And there we go. We can see here that there's a little bit of weight in some of the text here. So let's try to go and check why the font weight 300 that is specified in our, let me go and check here. We should have a 300 font weight here. Let's go check in our inspector here. So section here, we have the H3, and we can see that we have a declared font weight here. So if we try to remove that, let's see what will happen. Okay, so it will look like the one that we have here. That font weight declaration that we have here was overriding the font weight declaration that was the default value of the Google font style that we have here, the light 300. So let's go and try to implement this in our code editor, because if we try to refresh this, you will see it will go back to the original code or styles that we have implemented. So we do have here the font weight for the H3. Let's try to remove that, and let's save that, and let's go back to our browser, and there we go. We now have our same styling for our H3s here. So the next thing that we would want to do here is to go and add some skills and abilities. So we do see here that we have rows, and we can consider this as table data cells. We can use table for developing the layout here. So let's try to go and implement that in our code. Now let's go down to our skills section. Let me go and delete this. Let's save that. And then let's have the skills abilities, HR, the table. Then we do have a table row that should contain a table header. If we go back to our example here, so we have table headers here. So let's go back to our code editor here. Let's have a table header here, th, and let's give it a value of computer skills. Let's see here. Let's refresh. Okay, there it is. Now we have other skills here. Let me just go and so that we can see what's in here. So we have computer skills for the table header. Then we would want to have we have a table header here and another table cell here, as we know that the columns, we will need to maximize the use of table data cells. So we can go back to our code editor here, and then let's have an empty table data cell and another table header here that has the other skills. And then another table data cell here. Let's see how that will look. Okay, so there's the space that we needed. Okay, so let me go and open up our code editor here. Now let's go to the next row here, and let's do the first skill, touch typist. And we need to have the stars, the emojis. If you remember, we press on the Windows key and then the semicolon, and that will be allowing us to insert emojis in our project. So let's go and have 5-star for that. Because I'm a touch typist, I can type at least 40 to 60 words per minute depending on the document that I'm trying to copy. Now let's try to go and refresh this. Okay, so we now have the touch typist table data cell here and then the stars. So you would see that we're now practicing what we have learned in the table section, and we are also reviewing some of the things that we have already done. So I'm hoping that you were able to find out on your own on how you can go and reposition some of your elements using tables and the other things that we have so far learned in the previous lessons. So let's go and look at here. We know that we will need another column for the musician word that we have here and the rating for that skill. So let's go back to our code editor, and we can just copy this because this is part of the same row, and we just need to change the text here and type musician. Now let's save this and refresh, and there we go. We now have 4 columns that contains the first skill related to computer skills and other skills. So what we just need to do is to go and copy what we have here inside of the other rows, right? And then replace the contents here. So we know that this is the computer skills, touch typist. We have HTML, CSS, and CSS, and we have here JavaScript. We also have here another row that should be containing Bootstrap for the framework. Let's also have another row here for the AngularJS framework and jQuery. Let's have jQuery here. And for another row that will be for the computer repair and computer networks. So you would see that layouting using tables can be a bit confusing, but once you understand how we use table data cells, table rows, table headers, it becomes a lot easier for us to maximize the use of these elements and write our markup. So if I go back here, you would see now that we have the following content. So we will just need to change the content for the other skills that we have here. So let's go back to our code editor. Then let's replace some of the content that we have here. So musician, writer. I just want you to practice what we have so far learned in the previous lessons, and of course try to go and play around with some of the things that you have learned in the past, and of course discover some things on your own That's why I wanted you to go and do this first and then do your research before I went on and guided you through on how I did the project. I just wanted you to feel empowered that you can actually really do this. Just try to really believe in yourself and then try to do your research, read a lot of the documentation, and you would see that I'm not using PowerPoint, but instead I'm using the documentations here just to really go through the documentation and try to read through them. And of course, for you to understand how we can go and apply what's inside of the documentation. So let's go and try to refresh this. And there we go. Now, a quick way on how we can add some spacing inside of our tables would be to use the attribute of the table that we call cell spacing. So if we try to go here, so again, if you remember, we have what we call element attributes, and cell spacing is one of them that we can use for the element table, for the table element. So if I give this a 20 pixels value and try to refresh this, you would see now that we have the spacing that we needed for our project here. Now we want to move this a little bit to the left, so we can actually add some padding here, similar to this one. So you can see it's aligned to the table data cells, and we can see also that the table header here is not bold, so we can see that it has a font weight 400 that we declared in our previous template. So if we try to remove it, you will see it's also the one that's causing it to not look similar to the one that we have here. So let's try to remove that in our code and go to our code editor here. Then go to our table header here and apply a padding right of, let's say, 35 pixels. Let's also try to remove the font weight of 400 here. Let's save that, and there we go. So just a keynote to remember, everyone. We remember that the cell spacing is an attribute that is already deprecated. So if we go back to HTML element table MDN and we go to the MDN documentation here, we remember that the attribute cell spacing is already deprecated, and it defines the size of the space between two cells in percentage value or pixels. The attribute is applied both horizontally and vertically to the space between the top of the table and the cells of the first row, the left of the table and the first column, the right of the table and the last column, and the bottom of the table and the last row. To achieve a similar effect, apply the border spacing property to the table element, and the border spacing does not have any effect if border collapses and is set to collapse. So let's try to go and use this border spacing property to the table element. Let's give it a class and target that specific table. So if we try to click on it and then check this out, okay, so perhaps let's go and try to apply it in our project. So let's go and have a class name for that table. So let's have a table skills here, then border spacing and 25 pixels. If I remember it correctly, it's 25 pixels that we declared here for the cell spacing. Oh, it's only 20 pixels. So let's try to remove this and give the attribute class name tables or table skills. Then go back here and then let's try to go and give it a 20 pixels here. Let's see what will happen, and nothing changed. So if we try to go and use the inspector here, let's go to our table here, let me just check here for the table. T-body, table skills, and if we try to increase this, there you go. So it's implementing the same styling similar to the cell spacing attribute that is already deprecated. So now let's try to go down here, and we've already accomplished what we needed to do. Perhaps the only thing that we need to do here is to go and add some line breaks for our experience section. So let's go here. Let's see here, we have line breaks from our experience section here, and we have that line break after the word most. So let's go and put a line break here, similar with the second line break again. And for the education part, that's also the same thing. So let's go look for degree, location, school name. Let me just check here. Okay, so we did not put any content here in here. We can actually use th here so that it will have the same styling as to our example here. So if I go to our, instead of td, let's use th, and there you go. So it's similar to the one that we have here in our example. Now what we want to do here is to go and apply the same styling similar to this one. So we want it to move a little bit to the left. So let's go and implement that in our code. So we would want to go and change this to th. So let's try to go back to our code editor here and select our td here, and then give it a style of padding left with a value of 72 pixels. Let's try to refresh, and there we go. So let's apply that in our same td. Oops, Control C, and place it here to the same td inside of the leadership section. So let's refresh that, and there we go. We now are done with our challenges here. So if we want to add some more dates from to and degree location for it to look a lot more like the one that we have here, we just need to go and copy the, where's that, the content here in the education section here. So we'll just need to copy that and then refresh here, and there we go. We're now done with our challenge here. So I'm hoping you learned a lot in this session, and we can actually replace this so that it will look like this one. You can just go back to your code editor and our code editor here, and then not just use the Rodrigo Bonzer S. Lopez. And again, guys, you don't need to be totally copying the things that I'm doing here. I just wanted to show you on how I built this site here. And now we were able to copy the site here. Here we use cell spacing. Here we were able to use border spacing. And I hope you understood how to use the different properties that we've talked about in this lesson. So now we can go and connect this project to our main project. So I hope you learned a lot in this session, and Thank you, and let's continue with our succeeding lessons. So see you on our next lessons.